our colloquium. It's our pleasure to welcome you here at the Constantine Philosophy University. We have a class of students here. Hopefully you can see some. So today we will have a presentation. Say hi. Yeah. So today we will have a presentation on Blackout brought to light, a study of blackout poetry as visual narrative. So I'm going to give you the space and you can start your presentation now.
Greetings of the day, everyone. Before I begin, I'd like to first apologize. Chances are I might not do real justice to my presentation today. I just met with an accident 3 days ago, and I had to undergo a dental treatment, which is why it is still a little painful and swollen. I may not be very intelligible in certain words, but please bear with me while I present.
Thank you for joining us anyway.
Yeah. So I would now like to begin. Blackout brought to light a study of blackout poetry as a visual narrative. Uh, in a world flooded with language, tweets, posts, and feeds, writing is no longer only about adding to the existing corpus. It is about choosing what to leave out. Blackout poetry arises from this very cultural condition, a form that is created by erasing, that wields meaning through subtraction. Emily Ramsar aptly talks about, quote unquote, an ocean of texts, suggesting that contemporary poets have stopped fishing for new words and started rearranging the ones which are already drifting before them. Blackout poetry stands at the crossroads of literature, art, and authorship, reimagining reading as a creative act, as well as writing as a creative act, wherein the lines between a reader and a writer blur. What emerges from these blacked out pages is not silence, but a new kind of voice, one that speaks through absence. This paper explores blackout poetry as both a visual narrative and a philosophical statement about authorship in this digital era, arguing that blackout poetry transforms deletion into expression, um, repositioning the poet as both a reader and a creator at the same time. By analyzing works from Tom Phillips, Mary Ruefle, Isabel O'Hare, and Austin Kleon, alongside various digital blackouts circulating on social platforms like Instagram, Facebook, etc., we will see how erasure functions as authorship and how blank spaces of the page become sites of visual storytelling. Though often conflated, blackout and erasure poetry are distinct practices into each other. Erasure relies on removal, cutting or scrapping texts until the source disappears. Blackout, on the other hand, relies on covering, adding color, marks, or paint to obscure while leaving traces of the original. The differences, as Ramsar notes, lies between subtraction and addition. Tom Phillips's A Humument, 1970, created by painting and collaging over W. H. Malloch's A Human Document, illustrates this additive quality. His pages retain the skeleton of the Victorian novel, yet the visual layering transforms each page into an art object, where text and image coexist with each other. Phillips' treated pages preserve the ghost of the original, while constructing a parallel narrative through visual rhythm and color. Contrasting this with M. Norbuse's Phillips' work, that is Zong, written in 2008, which is an erasure poem based on a legal report of a slave massacre. Philip deletes fragments and silences the text until only remnants of language remain, a haunting performance of historical violence. The act of scraping out language reflects the trauma of erasure itself. Where Phillips's poem confronts obliteration, Phillips's work enacts recovery. The words remain buried, but they are breathing. The difference is very crucial. Blackout poetry's refusal to destroy makes it inherently dialogic. It stages a conversation between the old and the new, the seen and the unseen. The poet writes not against the original author, but through the original author. This brings us to the question of authorship, and when we talk of authorship, we are often reminded of Roland Barthes when he talked about the death of the author. But Blackout poetry resurrects this author only very differently. The Blackout poet is both a reader and a rewriter, inhabiting what Michel Foucault called the author function, a shifting position rather than a fixed identity. In Blackout poetry, authorship becomes a layered event. The source text provides a first voice, the blacking out adds another. Kenneth Goldsmith's notion of uncreative writing strengthens this view. In his manifesto, he insists that managing information and repurposing texts is the new creative labor. Blackout poetry embodies that philosophy. The poet's originality lies not in invention but in intervention. The act of choosing which words to spare and which to silence is itself authorship. This idea extends visually. The gestures of the hand, the marks, the scratches, lines are part of the narrative grammar. In Mary Ruefle's A Little White Shadow, written in 2006, she paints over an 1889 novel with white correction fluid, leaving small clusters of words afloat like fossils in the snow. Her whitened pages are acts of tenderness rather than aggression. Ruefle calls it quote unquote bandaging of words, turning the act of concealment into care. Her work blurs writing and drawing, showing that the visual treatment of text can itself tell a story of emotion and recovery. This process reveals a central paradox in the theory of authorship. While the form seems to enact the death, quote unquote, of the original author, it simultaneously announces the birth of a new, highly visible author figure. Blackout poetry, therefore, does not erase authorship, it redefines authorship. In this new aesthetic, authorship is no longer originality as an invention. It is originality as selection, curation, transformation, and visual representation. Every Blackout poem is also a picture. Its meaning arises not only from what is read, but from how we see, and what we see. Visual semioticians like Gunther Kress and Theo van Leeuwen argue that meaning in multimodal texts depends on the interaction of linguistic and visual codes. In Blackout poetry, the eye reads the image before the words. The black shapes, the white caps, the occasional sketches, they all frame the text's rhythm, functioning like cinematic editing, cutting, zooming, fading. And to further this, there are various bifurcations because not only do we have black and white blackout poems, but we also have creative painted blackout poems. This brings us to Austin Kleon's newspaper Blackout, written in 2010, which exemplifies this visual immediacy. Using a simple Sharpie over newsprint, Kleon reclaims disposable media as poetic space. One poem reads, and I quote, They didn't know it was a love story until the end. The surrounding blackout forms a thick border, isolating the line like a window. The poem's minimalism invites the reader's gaze to linger on the few visible words, the few visible laconic words. The black ink becomes both background and narrative tension, the darkness that it reveals. A classic example, another one from Austin Kleon's newspaper Blackout itself, illustrates this perfectly. Again, the quote unquote classic image of his work involves using a black pen or a Sharpie marker to create black bars, obscuring text like a secret CIA document. Imagine a poem excavated from a dense article in a newspaper's business section that reads simply, quote, "He was ambitious, designed to break your heart," unquote. The power of this new laconic and deeply personal poem is derived entirely from its constraint. The reader sees the shadow of the original text, a dry, impersonal public news report, and understands the poem as an act of submersive transformation. The competing semiotic regime created by the black marker has turned public data into private poetry, objective reportage into subjective warning. Isabel O'Hare, her digital project, All This Can Be Yours, written in 2018, adds another layer to this. Using public apology statements from men accused during the hashtag MeToo movement, O'Hare bragged out their justifications, leaving behind lines like, quote, "I am sorry for the silence that followed," unquote. She shared these poems on Twitter and Instagram, where the visual impact of redacted apology statements resonated very powerfully. O'Hare's use of digital platforms turns Blackout into social commentary, merging activism with aesthetics. The sharp contrast of white text on dark background echoes government censorship documents, exposing how power manipulates visibility. Similarly, on social platforms, creators film the process of making blackout poems, brushing ink, revealing words, narrating discovery. One viral example uses a New York Times article about climate change, and as the creator covers the page in blue watercolor waves through paints, the reimagining words read, and I quote, "We were warned, and we kept building the fire higher." Unquote. Here, the image, the swelling blue that looks like rising seas, amplifies the poem's environmental urgency. The moving hand recorded and shared becomes part of the artwork, merging process and product into one cohesive narrative act. In this digital era, blackout poetry thrives as a participatory practice. The internet has become both a gallery and a workshop at the same time. Platforms like Instagram host thousands of poets who transform screenshots, Wikipedia pages, and even spam emails into blackout pieces, which are creative and artistic at the same time. This democratization reflects the ethos of remix culture, where creation emerges from recontextualization. Kenneth Goldsmith's call to manage information rather than generate it finds vivid expression here. A blackout poet scrolling through an online news article uh, performs the same act as a DJ sampling a vinyl record, for instance, selecting, isolating, and layering fragments to produce a new rhythm and meaning. The result is a visual remix, part poem, part artifact. The visual aspect also carries narrative power. Digital blackout poets often add illustration, color gradients, or motion effects, turning static text into animated storytelling. One Instagram artist overlays their blackout poem on an image of a city skyline, and the words read, I quote, "Even in the noise, a quiet song survives," unquote. The typography fades into the skyline's light, creating a dialogue between word and world. The visual field becomes a narrative space, a poem that can exist only as an image. Moreover, blackout poetry's participatory nature blurs the boundary between reader and writer. When viewers comment, remix, or repost, they continue the act of rewriting. This shared authorship echoes Roland Barthes' idea that, I quote, "a text's unity lies not in its origin, but in its destination," unquote. Blackout poetry thus becomes a living conversation, a textual ecosystem sustained by collective imagination. So, the central paradox of blackout poetry is that it speaks through silence. What is removed is as meaningful as what remains. This is where its philosophical depth lies. In visual terms, the blacked out sections are not empty, they are charged with potential meaning. They suggest secrets, censorship, and mystery. In an anonymous digital blackout poem titled Obsolete Language, the creator blacked out an article on technology until only this remained. And I quote, "The machine forgot how to listen." Unquote. The surrounding darkness becomes metaphorical, the machine's blindness rendered visible. The erased words from the technical article form an invisible narrative of technological alienation. This interplay of the seen and the unseen mirrors the cognitive act of reading itself. Our eyes fill in what is missing, constructing coherence from fragments because we as humans tend to perceive even the world only in binaries, as Derrida would say. Uh, poetry also reconfigures narrative temporality. Each act of covering implies a before and an after, the story of the original text and the story of its transformation. In Phillips's A Humament, the recurring character Bill Tudge emerges only when the letters TOGE appear in sequence within a page. This constraint driven narrative, born from textual coincidence, exemplifies how meaning in blackout poetry depends on discovery and not just design. Through such acts, the blackout poet becomes what we might call an author in shadows, a figure who writes by omission, shaping absence into expression. The poet's authority arises not from control but from surrender to chance, to material, to dialogue with another's words. So blackout poetry offers more than a new technique to us. It offers a philosophy of creation in an age overwhelmed with text. It proposes that to write is to curate, to edit, to silence selectively. Its hybrid nature, part visual art, part literary intervention, embodies how contemporary culture negotiates meaning through fragments and layers and participatory exchange. By transforming existing texts into visual narratives, blackout poets challenge our understanding of authorship, originality, and reading itself. They remind us that erasure is not destruction but transformation, that silence can speak louder than speech. Whether through Tom Phillips's painted pages, Mary Ruefle's whitewashed elegies, Isabel O'Hare's digital redactions, or the scrolling videos of anonymous creators, blackout poetry continues to evolve as a living dialogue between text, image, and reader, making a creator a curator. In the end, blackout poetry mirrors the world that created it, a world saturated with words yet still searching always for meaning. In blacking out, poets do not remove, they reveal. What remains on the page is not what was lost, but what was found. Thank you so much. Once again, I apologize for a little bit of unintelligibility from my end.
Thank you very much. No need to apologize. I think it was very interesting. Do we have any questions? Maybe yes. There's a yes. Thank you. Are there any questions? Maybe. Have you heard about Blackout poetry before?
Not really. No, that's a new concept.
Yes. So thank you for introducing that. It's not something that we discuss here very often with our students. So I think that was very inspiring. So thank you for that. And maybe if there are no questions, we can move to the other presentation in this section. Do we have Karima present?
Oh, meanwhile, the next person introduces. I also had some Blackout because this is about visual narratives. I also have some Blackout poems, which I will try to share the PPT with Maria Madam via email. I could not, due to the accident, I could not manage to make that PPT. So when we view it, it is even more interesting.
Yeah, because that's another element, yes, that contributes to the discussion, that you have to see it.
Yeah, absolutely. Seeing gives a little more clarity.
Yes. Okay, thank you for that.
All right, thank you so much once again.
Okay, so I don't see Karima present. So maybe can we move to the next presentation? Do we have, I'm sorry if I mispronounced this, Woulef Salah present?
Yes, okay, I'm here. Okay.
Okay. Can we move to your presentation then? Yes. I'll just say briefly, we have a guest here from the, if I pronounce it again correctly, Baji Mokhtar Annaba University in Algeria. Yes. And this will be a presentation on Virginia Woolf's novel To the Lighthouse and the visual aesthetics with the subtitle Formlessness Creates Vision.
Thanks a lot. So
thank you.
let me try to see my PPT, then I'll start, okay? Where is it? Okay. Is it okay? Do you have the slides, please?
Yes, we do.
Okay. So, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks a lot for such opportunity. This is my third time to participate in your seminar, that I appreciate a lot. So thanks for you and for your department and the Constantine University. So my paper is entitled Virginia Woolf to the Lighthouse and the Visual Aesthetics, Formlessness Creates Form. This is my plan. Introduction. Number 1, formlessness creates vision. Number 2, Woolf and the visual aesthetics, the creative vision. Number 3, to the lighthouse between the value of art and the creation of unity. And number 4, transcendental dimension of art, and then conclusion. Introduction. It is a mistake to think that literature can be produced from the raw. One must get out of life. Yes, when I write, I am merely a sensibility. Now, as long as we are here, I'd like to be only a sensibility. Virginia Woolf. Visual art is able to develop linguistic expression. Its adaptation into a verbal sensibility acts as the modifying agent that so affects the literature. Jessica Slater. Number 1, formlessness creates vision. Visual aesthetics and verbal aesthetics influence frequently one another. Both make us feel, see, feel, and sense what we receive from the pattern of their composition. Subjectivity is embodied within us. It perceives the essence of art through the dialogical relation between reality and pictorial representation. Yuan Wan says, from an objective perspective, Most objects, and here he insinuates to Paul Cézanne, depicted are natural, and all natural entities could be considered geometric forms. However, how the visual object is represented in his painting contrasts with the viewer's experiential perception of it. The geometric forms that Paul Cézanne uses in his painting are cylinder, sphere, and cone, besides perpendicular lines, vertical and horizontal. Paul Cézanne, it's a quote from one of his letters. May I repeat what I told you here? Treat nature by means of the cylinder, the sphere, the cone, everything brought into proper perspective so that each side of an object or a plane is directed toward the central point. Lines parallel to the horizon give breadth. Lines perpendicular to this horizon give depth. But nature for us men is more depth than surface, whence the need to introduce into our light vibrations represented by the reds and yellows, a sufficient amount of blueness to give the feel of air. These geometric patterns are interconnected as in nature, and the horizontal and vertical lines are spatial construction on which we base our perception via the wheel of sensation. Paul Cézanne claims in a letter to a friend dated July 25, 1904, that the eye becomes concentric through looking and working. I mean to say that in an orange, an apple, a ball, a head, there is a culminating point, and this point is always, in spite of the tremendous effect, light and shade, color sensations, the closest to our eye. This is the painting of Paul Cézanne, which is very famous, the basket of apples. You see cylinder and the geometric forms. Roger Fry places perception between two poles, natural forms and emotional involvement. Quote, he, the artist, may give us the merest suggestion of natural forms and rely almost entirely upon the force and intent of the emotional elements involved in this presentment. Charles Moreau reproaches Fry and other formalist critics for having unsuccessfully traded feeling and perception, both rooted in human experience, for unattainable abstractions. He insists that such peculiarities actually define the aesthetic response. In his book, The Nature of Beauty in Art and Literature, he states that art is not the production of nature, but a deformation of nature, a kind of extract destined to bring into relief certain relations which would otherwise be lost amongst insignificant details. As an extract from the larger world, art affects us only if it is composed and selectively arranged so as to provoke sensations and responses to their strangeness. This vital zone is a place where impressions are colored as much by sensation as by the intellect. The aesthetic attitude then rests on a curious mixture of sensation and inhibition, the first depending on the second for its keenness, richness, and duration. End of quote. It's from Charles Moreau. The mind finds itself suspended at the point where pleasure becomes manifest between the stimulus and response, still with Moreau. The aesthetic response requires both an artist and a viewer to register not only the externality but also the bodily events. Charles Moreau provides Fry with a new term that connects inner qualities with outer ones in an empathetic identification that seems to connect shape with emotion in a more precise scientific way than Bell has in his rather mystical assertion of significant form. In now number 2, Woolf and the visual aesthetics, the creative vision. In A Sketch of the Past, Virginia Woolf recalled the prescriptions for literature Roger Fry made at this time. She said, literature was suffering from a plethora of old clothes. Cézanne and Picasso had shown the way. Writers should fling representation to the wind and follow suit. Between 1916 and 1920, Virginia Woolf, Roger Fry, and Cliff Bell explored the relationship of visual and verbal arts. Bell's view on significant form eventually appeared in his Art, 1914. He says, imagine a boat in complete isolation, detach it from man and his urgent activities and fabulous history. What is it that remains? What is it that to which we still react emotionally? What be pure form, and that which lying behind pure form gives it its significance? Bell's statement reflects the Bloomsbury's definition of essence, which involves a perceptual relationship between subject and object. Roger Fry shifts from the traditional position of idealistic universality to internal function that he calls creative vision. This creative vision is a combination of the inner and outer to form a pattern that relies on both, but is crystallized in a process of empathetic identification with the exterior. The artist's main business in life is carried on by means of a kind of vision, which I will call creative vision. End of quote. Art forms may differ, but what they have in common, as Virginia Woolf points out in A Sketch of the Past, is that the whole world is a work of art. We are the music. We are the thing itself. In her stories from 1915 onward, she explored both the attraction and limitation of formalist aesthetics, and as the 1920s opened, she was poised to use a visual aesthetic, not for an escape from the vicissitudes of a human existence, but as a way of understanding the role of a human imagination in the meanings assigned to existence itself. Virginia Woolf developed visual aesthetics in which the empathetic perceptual self, consisting of the eye and memory, combines with the exterior to create the inner landscape. This visual aesthetics resides in light and its different spectrum of colors, the prism. This aesthetics of light is reflected in her multi-personal style. Virginia Woolf's project, thus, is to find a language with the power of Cézanne's formulaic skill in painting. She subsequently, her impressionist vocabulary, like paint to the artist, is color words. Words like little shared lights, one red, one blue, one yellow, to the lighthouse. Virginia Woolf, a quote, it's from Book and Artists, all the reds and blues and lights and shades of the scene are parts of the pattern of verbal vision. The writer who uses them, like Walter Pater, is the writer who from words made blue and gold and green, marble brick, the wax petals of flowers, warmth too, and scents, all things that the hand delighted to touch and the nostrils to smell. Sense data are momentary. Each patch and arrangement of color represents for Woolf what Woolf calls any turn in the wheel of sensation. To the Lighthouse, page 9. A painting may group fragments of different common sense objects in order to create vision, mosaic whole. So the novel creates characters out of the bundles of more than one person's experiences, forming biographies in which it is merely contingent that two people are not one. Such pattern is a multiplicity that becomes unity, as in Cézanne's geometric pattern. Into the Lighthouse, Virginia Woolf emphasized, number 3 now, in the plan. Into the Lighthouse, Woolf emphasizes both the value of art and the creation of unity. She demonstrates in the figure of Lily Briscoe that the artist who creates whole creates art. Through her painting canvas, Lily expresses her desire to bring everything together and impose a sense of order on an otherwise chaotic existence. Quote, she hated playing at painting, a brush, the one dependable thing in a world of strife, ruin, chaos. The one should not play with, to the Lighthouse. In the novel, art is the vehicle by which things are put together. It is the ultimate unifier, capable of resolving the fracta and fragmentations of a human life. In the case of Mrs. Ramsay, her goal as a life artist is to achieve unity and wholeness in every sphere of life. She expends considerable energy in establishing relationships, hoping that the union of two people can create an enduring whole strong enough to battle the forces of decay and destruction. However, her efforts to unite people appear often as futile ones. Human relationships in the text are described as flawed, despicable, and self-seeking at their best. As Mrs. Ramsey's art is the making of such whole, we could also say that her view echoes that of Roger Fry. Life is meaningless without art. It is precisely in death that Mrs. Ramsey is remembered as the unifier, because without her, the world seems to dissipate. It is this dissolution of the whole that threatens Lily, and it is wholeness which she seeks to restore in her own art, for it is as if the link that usually bound things together had been cut, and they floated up there, up here, down there, off anyhow. How aimless it was, how chaotic, how unread it was. Into the lighthouse, life is revealed as an imperfect art that can create only temporary unions. In order for the wholeness in life to endure, it must be immortalized through an art that is not subject to the chaos and strife of life. Lily's picture, and indeed Woolf's To the Lighthouse, could be viewed as an attempt to such an art. She looked at her picture. That would have been Mr. Michael's answer, presumably how you and I and she pass and vanish. Nothing stays, all changes, but not words, not paint. The form of Woolf's artistic vision is closely allied with the post-impressionist non-mimetic art advocated by Fry, an art in which the artist seeks to give up all resemblances to nature, form, and to create a purely abstract language of form, visual music. It's from Vision and Design. This is particularly evident in the ways Lily conceives her art. For her, the fact that something can intrude into a scene calculated to stir the most sublime reflections is sublimity. It suggests that such reflections, rather than being true representations of what it is, they are already mediated representations of the subject life. A quote from To the Lighthouse. No, she said, she could not want a pair. Indeed, she had been keeping guard over the dish of fruit without realizing it, jealously hoping that nobody would touch it. Her eyes had been going in and out among the curves and shadows of the fruit, among the rich purples of the lowland grapes, then over the horny ridge of the shell, putting a yellow against a purple, a curved shape against a round shape, without knowing why she did it, or why, even every time she did it, she felt more and more serene, until, oh, what a pity that they should do it. A hand reached out, took a pair, and spoiled the whole thing. This quote is somehow describing this picture of Cézanne, apples, pear, and grapes. Lily, the tree, and the canvas. It's number 3. The tree is repositioned by Lily to keep up with her unique perspective that he who owns her work has control over her life, that she does not have to depend on others. Later that evening, Lily decides that she would move the tree rather more to the middle when thinking that her life does not need a marriage to be meaningful. Moving the tree to the middle of Lily's composition breaks the vacancy in the foreground of her painting, thus achieving formalist unity. This is also the pain of the tree. As you see, the tree of the large pine is the tree is supposed to be somewhere in the forest, but Cézanne has put it in the mid. This is exactly what Lily Briscoe did in her painting. Lily, the tree, and the canvas. Moving the tree is the center that accommodates with Lily Briscoe's painting, as it is a tree that helps her to unify and complete her painting, and a center line that creates the final movement necessary. Roger Fry goes on to discuss the ways in which Impressionism fails to express the treeness of the tree by placing too much emphasis on capturing the tree, as it is at the very precise moment of the artist's viewing of it. This is reminiscent of Lily's struggle with her painting Into the Lighthouse, as she finds herself questioning where to place the tree. In having Lily create an art which gives up all resemblance to natural nature by depicting life as an imperfect and temporary reality, and through representing pictorial art as an everlasting one, Woolf seems to have borrowed Fry's aesthetic formulation that actual life compares partially and inadequately to the imaginative life, which is art. However, despite the suggestions that art enables an escape from life, for Woolf, the imaginative life cannot be distinguished from life. They are not from the actual life. Into the Lighthouse, art is always infused with life. They are not separate. Woolf's philosophy in the interdependence of life and art is closer to G.E. Moore's conception of organic unity. The whole being greater than the sum of its parts is a necessary truth. Lily succeeds in her art, for she attempts to understand life as its mystery. Why was life so short? Why was it so inexplicable? Said it with violence. Beauty would roll itself up. The space would fill. Those empty flourishes would form into shape. If they shouted louder enough, Mrs. Ramsay would return. End of quote. Lily's vision at the end of the novel requires her immersion in such appearances in life. It is significant then that Lily makes her forms and colors crystallize into a harmony and realizes the whole mosaic of vision only after Mrs. Ramsay's death. When Mrs. Ramsay was alive, Lily was unable to make the entities cohere because it was Mrs. Ramsay who was the unifying force. Without Mrs. Ramsay, however, it was all dry, all withered, all spent, a world of strife, ruin, and chaos. So Lily, in order to experience wholeness again, needs to create her own union of parts, her own wholeness from the void left by Mrs. Ramsay. For it was not knowledge but unity that Lily desired, not inscription on tablets, nothing that could be written in any language known to man, but intimacy itself, which is knowledge. Therefore, life art and pictorial art are part of the same continuum. The symbolic passing from Mrs. Ramsay to Lily of the wholeness principle is integral to Woolf's conception of the interdependence of life and art. Unlike Mrs. Ramsay, Lily is not limited by her short-sighted vision, and as a result, she was able to succeed in a complete unification where Mrs. Ramsay appears to have failed. Yet, at the same time, Lily needs recourse to Mrs. Ramsay's view of life, however imperfect, in order to achieve her own vision of art. She began to lay on red a grey, and she began to model her way into the hollow there. And Lily, painting steadily, felt as if a door had opened, and as she dipped into the blue paint, she dipped too into the past there. Lily's art of painting and performance in harmonizing between the artistic acts, the rhythm of the body movement and the physical world is a translation of the body onto the canvas. What is communicated with striking clarity is the sense of bodily movement that constitutes the act of painting. To the Lighthouse, a quote, with a curious physical sensation, as if she were urged forward and at the same time must hold herself back, she made her first decisive stroke. The brush descended. It flickered brown over the white canvas. It left a running mark. A second time she did it, a third time. And so, paused and flickering, she attained a dancing rhythmical movement, as if the poses were one part of the rhythm and the stroke another, and all were related. And so, lightly and swiftly pausing, striking, she scored her canvas with the brown running nervous lines which had no sooner settled there than the enclosed. She felt it looming out at her, a space. End of quote. In Woolf's conception of aesthetic practice, the body mediates sensation. The latter is manifested in the body and translated by bodily movement into shape or form. The visual field creates rhythm, shape, and form. The artist does not simply impose artistic vision on what he sees, thereby transforming natural form into art form. Aesthetic performance is a process of alterity, grounded in and performed by or through the body and the physical world. Lily recognizes that her painting ought to preserve an awareness of the gulf between vision and the thing itself. She realizes that what the artist sees and what he feels about what he sees become a work of art. That is, when the inner form has been translated to the canvas and when the significance of the vision is communicated not in the language of surface representation, but in the language of the design, the artist reaches unity and order. A distinct division between art and life that Lily and Mrs. Ramsey represent is the significance of the first as an artist and the latter as a living. This divide is also noticeable in the novel structure. Life dominates in part 1. Art is the main motive in part 3, when Mrs. Ramsey is no longer alive. It's a quote from Rabbi Cohen. Cézanne attempts to grasp the intricacy of the relationship between life and death through opposing images. Woolf emphasizes the intimate connection between human finitude and infiniteness through Mrs. Ramsey's absence, which is more presence than absence. Into the Lighthouse, life leads to art and art leads to life. A quote by Rabbi Cohen. Her use of light and shadow as a way of flattening planes and creating an impossible light course can be seen throughout to the Lighthouse. For example, the first and third sections of the novel take place in the daylight, while the second section takes place in the nighttime. Light and shadow can be used together in order to create a juxtaposition of effects and therefore thoughts that appear far greater than the individual pieces themselves. It's a quote by Slayton. Lily portrays Mrs. Ramsey as a triangle rather than a realistic human figure. Why did Woolf choose this geometric figure to represent the female protagonist in the novel? The concrete shape of a triangle that bears no relevance to a mimetic representation of a human being.
البروف تاعنا تاع الليتيراتور في عناب بورقبي
of the intermingling roles of color and shapes relates to the misty recollection of the mother from Virginia, whom Virginia lost at the age of 13. It's a quote. Could Mrs. Ramsey, the purple triangular shape, express the impossible possibility of grasping the essence of Woolf's mourning for her mother? The grief that is both concrete and actually abstract, deeply humbling, in its impasse to be pinned down, and is at the same time shaped a triangle, and in shapely the human figure cannot be discerned. Still, it's a quote from Mohandlhadj. Mr. Banks notices the triangle purple shape on Lily's canvas and asks Lily what she wishes to indicate by it. It was Mrs. Ramsey reading to James, Lily answers. No one could tell the triangle for a human shape, but likeness is not what Lily attempts. She is practicing the anti-mimetic formalism, where the evaluation standard reads that a man's head is no more than and no less important than a pumpkin. It's by Fry, Vision and Design. Mr. Banks is intrigued, mother and the child then, objects of universal veneration, and in this case the mother was famous for her beauty, might be reduced, he pondered, to a purple shadow without reverence. H design to Lighthouse. Woolf drew the figure H in her notebook as a visual representation for the novel's future schematic outline. Section 1, the window, and Section 3, the lighthouse, refers to the vertical legs of the letter H. These two sections serve as the stable and parallel moments through which a sense of power and dignity can be achieved. Visual artists use vertical lines in order to convey the same sentiment. It's the idea of Slayton. The Section 2, time passes, is a transitive addition and acts as the connecting horizontal line found in the figure H. It serves to join the window to the lighthouse. Horizontal lines are used to fulfill the purpose in the visual arts and can be seen doing so in the literary world of To the Lighthouse, still with Slayton. The whole thing changed. Lily Briscoe adopts a formalist approach in her painting. Instead of copying from life, she simplifies and abstracts. Lily thus contrasts sharply with Poe's thought the realist artist invoked in the text. At the beginning of the novel, soaring along the seashore, Mrs. Ramsay admires the beauty of the view, which reminds her of the artists, Mr. Ponsford and his followers, and their indistinguishable painterly attempts to represent the view. Since Mr. Ponsford had been there 3 years before, all the pictures were like that, she said, green and grey with lemon-colored sailing boats and pink women on the beach. During her stroll with Mr. Banks, Lily notices the bright colors and objects, yet refuses to see and portray them realistically. Then beneath the color, there was the shape. She could see it all so clearly, so commandingly when she looked. It was when she took her brush in hand that the whole thing changed. Now, number 4, transcendental dimension of art. Woolf adds to her artistic design a transcendental dimension, any form that cannot transcend reality and step beyond the earthly world could not express the spiritual intensity of characters. Thus, she leans progressively to mystical experiences. Havana Richard says, perceptual vision is influenced in a similar manner by the mind itself, with its own abstract process of combining unrelated precepts into the unity which we consider the object, a process that corresponds to what we loosely term imagination. Memory and thought likewise influence perception vision, since we tend to project our preconcepts about and memory of an object. Such perceptual vision is a flicker of subliminal response to life. This process of sublimation carries the correspondences of the self with the universe up to higher levels than those on which our normal consciousness works. These moments of transcendental reality are the outcome of the pressure of everyday constraints. They unite and harmonize what time has already fragmented and dissipated. Conclusion. The sensory, the suggestive, the visual transcendence are all parts of the visual aesthetics that creates out of them the whole via the wheel of sensation. Woolf seems to consider the object in a subjective manner, and thus she colors it with her individual sensations, thoughts, and memories. The object, therefore, becomes an image of the self and its own extension. Woolf transforms any sensory contact with the object into artistic image. Physical images are parts of her artistic design, through which she represents her mind and her reality. That is, she encloses her inner world in the visual world that surrounds her. Here are the references, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I'll just ask my students, are there any questions? No, because we're going to talk about Virginia Woolf in a few weeks. So thank you for this introduction. I think her visual poetics and the sensibilities that you presented are very eminent in her work. So we're going to talk about it in a few weeks. So thank you for the introduction very much.
Thanks a lot. Wish you good luck. Wish you good luck. Go ahead.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks.
And I would like to ask for the last presentation to start. So I think if you can help me.
The last presentation is from Professor Karima Mohandlhadj. I'm sorry if I read that name correctly, from Beni Mokhtar University in Algeria. And the topic is Authorship in the Digital Future, a Barthesian reading of Gary Shteyngart's superset True Love story. Unfortunately, Karima wasn't able to join us. And therefore, she sent us a presentation pre-recorded, so I'm going to share it right now. I would please Professor Salim to stop sharing his presentation so I can share this other one.
It's okay, it's done.
Yeah, Yeah, I'm starting to share my screen. So there's the presentation, and we can start it. Oh, let me see. Share sound as well.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Karima Mohandlhadj
Can you hear it?
University, Algeria.
Yes.
It's my pleasure to present my work today entitled Authorship in the Digital Future, a Barthesian reading of Gary Shteyngart's super sad true love story. When Roland Barthes declared the death of the author in 1967, he overturned centuries of literary tradition by challenging the idea that meaning originates from a single, authoritative source. For Barthes, the text is a tissue of quotations, woven from cultural references and open to countless interpretations. Meaning is therefore produced by the reader, not transmitted by the writer. In today's digital world, this metaphorical death has become a cultural reality. The rise of algorithms, social media, and data-driven communication has fragmented authorship, blurred identity, and transformed reading into a form of information processing. Gary Shteyngart's super sad true love story 2010 imagines precisely this world, a near future America where books are mocked, privacy is erased, and selfhood is reduced to digital metrics. This presentation explores how Shteyngарт's novel transforms Barthes's theory into a lived condition. It shows how authorship, readership, and narrative itself are deconstructed by a culture of constant surveillance and performative communication. As part of my research, I focus on Gary Shteyngart's novel, Super Sad True Love Story, and its relationship to Roland Barthes's concept of the death of the author. This leads me to two central questions. First, I ask, how does Gary Shteyngart's Super Sad True Love Story extend and critique Roland Barthes's death of the author? Second, I explore the role of algorithmic surveillance in the relationship between reader, text, and author in Super Sad True Love Story. These two questions guide my analysis of authorship in the digital age, allowing us to think about how literature, readers, and authors interact in an increasingly algorithmic world. Based on these research questions, my study has three main objectives. First, to analyze how Super Sad True Love Story emerges or engages with Barthes's concept of the death of the author, and whether it challenges or extends its ideas in the context of digital culture. Second, to examine how algorithmic surveillance in the novel reshapes the relationship between reader, the text, and author. Third, to explore the broader implications of understanding authorship and interpretation in an era dominated by data and digital mediation. Together, these objectives guide my investigation into how literature interacts with technology and how our understanding of authorship evolves in the digital age. Barthes's essay, The Death of the Author, argued that the author should no longer be seen as the source of meaning. Once a text is written, it escapes its origin, that is, interpretation belongs to the reader. This shift from author to reader mirrors broader cultural changes in how we think about knowledge, authority, and individuality. Barthes envisioned a future where writing becomes a neutral composite space, a place where voices, citations, and codes intermingle. The writer becomes a scripter rather than a creator, assembling language rather than expressing a unified self. In a sense, the author dies so that the reader may be born. More than half a century later, digital culture seems to have realized this condition, but not in the emancipatory way Barthes imagined. Online, the author's individuality dissolves not into readerly freedom but into algorithmic visibility. Meaning circulates endlessly, detached from intention, filtered through data system and value clicks over creativity. Shteyngart's super sad true love story is set in a hyper-capitalist, technologically saturated America. Citizens are constantly rated by their credit pools and apparatus. These are devices that broadcast personal data, rankings, and attractiveness scores. Literature has become obsolete, and print books are smelly relics of a forgotten past. The protagonist, Lenny Abramov, as described by Shteyngart, is a short, baldy man with bad glasses, is one of the few who still reads and cherishes books. His love for reading and for a young woman, she is a Korean American young girl named Eunice Park, places him in a conflict with a society obsessed with instant communication and emotional transparency. The novel alternates between Lenny's diary entries and Eunice's online messages, exposing the collapse of private thought and authentic voice. In this world, writing no longer communicates meaning. It performs identity. In fact, posts and profiles replace narrative. As one critic notes, Shteyngart's satire reveals a culture where language has lost depth, becoming a medium of surveillance rather than expression. The novel's fragmented structure, if you can see while reading the novel, it's half diary, half digital feed, etc. until the end. This structure mirrors the disintegration of coherent authorship. Barthes's theoretical death, in fact, becomes literal in this novel. Books, once symbols of permanence, are mocked as inefficient objects. Early in the story, Lenny's colleagues ridicule his stinky books, insisting that no one reads anymore. This comic moment captures a profound shift. That is, the end of authorship as a source of authority and value. Lenny's diary entries represent the last trace of traditional authorship, introspective, reflective, and written in long sentences. Eunice's messages, by contrast, are brief, performative, and socially conditioned by the language of the consumer culture. Together, their voices dramatize the tension between the depth and surface, memory and immediacy, authenticity and algorithm. In this sense, Shteyngart's text becomes a dialogue between two writing systems, the book and the screen. The novel itself performs the conflict between them by presenting both voices without privileging one. Shteyngarт enacts Barthes's idea of the text as a plural space where no single perspective dominates. Lenny's diary entries, in fact, exemplify this protagonist's self-identification as a reader. And this emphasizes his connection to traditional forms of knowledge and introspection. As he presenting himself to his lover for the first time, he said, I quote, "I am a man who reads books and I am proud of it." Eunice's messages, conversely, are short and at the point, characteristic of digital communication that prioritizes brevity. As she introduces herself, in turn to Lenny, she said, "I like little dogs." Barthes believed that meaning emerges in the act of reading through the reader's engagement with the text. In Super Sad Love Story, reading no longer produces meaning, it produces data. The apparatuses that mediate communication turn readers into measurable consumers. When Lenny's digital profile reveals his personal preferences and income level, his identity is no longer narrated but calculated. Eunice's emotional life is shaped by online feedback, likes, and metrics. Shteyngart shows a world where selfhood and authorship have both been outsourced to algorithms, where the act of writing is indistinguishable from data entry. This transformation reflects a paradoxical fulfillment of Barthes's vision. The author has died, but not to liberate the reader. Instead, both are subsumed by systems of computation. Reading becomes passive consumption. Writing becomes performance for invisible audiences. The result is not multiplicity of meaning, but uniformity of behavior. Despite this bleak satire, the novel does not completely abandon narrative. Lenny's diary remains an attempt to preserve continuity and depth. To write against the digital current, his language, filled with nostalgia and irony, resists total absorption into data culture. Through him, Shteyngart suggests that storytelling may still hold ethical power even in a world of technological alienation. In this way, Super Sad True Love Story both performs and resists the death of the author. It acknowledges the dissolution of individual voice while still longing for it. The very act of writing the novel, or of giving form to this dystopia, reasserts the possibility of authorship in an age that denies it. In other words, Barthes's theory finds new meaning in Shteyngart's novel. That is, if authorship is dead, what replaces it is not silence but multiplicity. It is the coexistence of human voices, digital traces, and machine codes. Shteyngart's fiction, in fact, captures this liminal space between the author's disappearance and the persistence of narrative meaning.
Okay, so that was the presentation by Karima, and with that we end this day of our colloquium.